So this is the first session for a series that Laura and I are really excited to put together that features conversations with humanists, many of them WashU alums, who hold positions outside of the professoriate. So there's a few goals here. The first is to have real conversations with people in careers that are often at the top of the list of quote unquote best alternatives to the professor gig. Sometimes, actually always, it's an opportunity to engage directly with someone who's better than doom scrolling on LinkedIn. The second goal is to turn this very bad framing of alternatives to academia on its head, since that figures that any job that isn't a professor job is some kind of less desired plan B, which really kind of sets the tone of settling for second best and really forecloses, I think, on any possibility of getting to know the full range of possibilities within other jobs and other careers in the humanities. And I think the third and final goal that we have, and something that I know that we've connected with you on, Kenley, already, is the sense that a career in the humanities is the view we should take of that is a little more all-encompassing. A career is not a single job posting, but a longer chronology of multiple positions, multiple adaptations and navigations of paid labor that enable working humanists to thrive and not just get paid. So, all grad students, as a reminder, right, are already in their careers. They're already on the way, right? Um, so with that, I introduce everyone to Kenley Brown. Dr. Kenley Brown is a program officer for strategic initiatives at the Spencer Foundation. And in her position, she organizes and implements strategic work and reviews across major grant programs. And in today's talk, she's going to dive a little deeper into what Spencer does, what foundations do more broadly, and what roles humanists play in the ecosystem of private foundation work. And the place that private foundations have in that broader humanities ecosystem. So Dr. Brown is a Black feminist qualitative researcher who centers the study of Black girlhood, institutional violence, and subversive dreaming. I love that phrase. Previously, she was a postdoctoral fellow at WashU in St. Louis in the Department of African and African American Studies. And during her time here, she founded and led the Black Girlhood Study Lab housed in the Center for Race, Ethnicity, and Equity, where students and collaborators explored, centered, and supported Black girl life through research, community engagement, and mentorship. Thank you so much, Kenley, for being with us, and welcome. Yay. Great. It's so great to have you. I know that the elephant in the room question is a number one on our list, so let's get right into it, which is how did you land your job? And sort of broadly, can you talk a little bit about when and how you began to focus on foundation work specifically as a possible career move? And yeah, let's start there.
That's a wonderful question to ask. And just for context and just level setting for the conversation, I do want to acknowledge the current political moment we are in is experiencing such volatility, particularly around higher education and funding opportunities, and just the evisceration, right, of this critical innovative work that has been going on for decades and even generations of scholars. At the same time, as things are collapsing, there is a building of futures, innovations, and creativity that we are at the helm of. And I just hope this conversation can generate some of that strategic work and just kind of honoring the context we are in. So when I first learned about this position, I was actually a postdoc at WashU at the time. And I was on the crossroads of just figuring out, do I want to apply for a tenure track position and or pursue work outside the academy? Full disclosure, when I started my PhD journey and training, I always imagined I would have extended opportunities beyond the academy. And yet I was told by well-meaning mentors, keep that on the down low. Don't say that you're looking outside of tenure track R1 positions because then you won't be trained appropriately. And so while I know they were well-meaning, I've learned how to strategically accrue different expertise in my graduate career. So before I even came to the postdoc, I had been involved in internships over the summer, just for like financial opportunities, but that gave me an opportunity to work with community organizations and leaders to think about how research can galvanize and shift conversations and actions that can create just and equitable communities and safety. And so once I was in the postdoc and I had, founded the lab and I was finishing up my journal articles. As you know, articles take like 5 years to write and see the publication. So finally, I saw the work in grad school come to fruition in publications. In that postdoc year, I decided to cold call PhDs in different industries because I realized I can't ask professors still in the academy what it is like to work outside the academy. So I had to ask the folks who did that, had that journey. And so I was able to receive many callbacks. Some didn't respond, but for the most part, there were responses. And I was able to kind of level set how they embarked on their journey outside the academy. What were some losses that you miss in academic work, creativity, autonomy, original thought work, teaching, mentorship, and also what they gained to work on teams around research projects, move policy, move practice on the ground, and see impact outside the ivory walls. And so through that learning, I was also very honest with my committee by that point because you still need your letters of recommendation from your search committee. And I just told them I'm looking for both jobs. And so my advisor was actually in conversation with the current president, Naila Nasir, about like my current trajectory. And I was looking at different industries. And so she's like, oh, we have availability at Spencer. Tell Kelly to submit her application. And so there is something about sharing vulnerably that you are interested in a different track later on in your career. And to say I wasn't at a point where it's like I'm failing, I don't see a future. I was getting interviews, I was on the cusp of securing an in-person campus interview at a university, but I was like, I just have to see what the other side looks like. As not like a second choice, but a choice I can make in empowerment and in discernment and in just curiosity to learn something new. So foundations were actually on my radar. They became on my radar because of this connection. And so I learned like while there's a fraught relationship with funding and foundations historically, like there is in universities, there is a way that folks are reframing and pivoting and transparently engaging work that is equitable, that centers people, communities of color, and that has an economic justice frame to it. And so Spencer, for the first time, had hired or employed a female president. We also had an Indigenous senior vice president, Megan Bang, at Spencer, and they had done phenomenal work kind of breaking down the walls of the foundation through being more transparent. We had in-person office hours. We also invited scholars into this space to learn more about the work. We also funded more diverse universities, people, studies, et cetera, that expanded the work beyond what was traditionally funded. So I was excited to participate in that type of team. And so I would say the foundation world found me. But as I've been here, I see like a lot of foundations are interested in researchers and they're interested in the skill sets that we are trained with in the academy in a way that I just didn't know beforehand. And the last piece is I knew about Spencer particularly because it funded education research. And so as grad students, we're told to apply for grants. So I already knew that side of applying and getting rejected and sometimes rewarded. But it was nice to be on the other side of like, oh, that's what they're looking for in a competitive application. And I try to inform my conversations with prospective scholars with that eye of like, this is a good enough application. Here's a great application. And I've really kind of loved the work and the connections I've made with scholars, but also other funders in their own learning journeys in this work.
That's really cool. And I love how you anticipated my next question in like a really great way, which was sort of like roughly like, what advice do you have for people interested in this work? And your process is really that broader process of a discernment that's like, what other opportunities are there? What other pathways? Let me just keep my eyes and ears open, and do this kind of broader cold calling. And it's less of a story of like, I knew I wanted to be a program officer for sure, right? So that's really interesting. And I think one of the pieces of advice that I was thinking myself that you might offer is like, graduate students are often encouraged to find grant opportunities, right? But we think of that as strictly like a CV building kind of move or, putting your project forward, but you actually use it as kind of a research opportunity for your career preparations. Can you say a little bit more about like, learning the foundation from the side of a grant applicant and how you use that to sort of understand what program officers do. And then maybe we can kind of talk a little bit more about what your role actually is and what you get into on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, I really love that question around just the evolution and relationship I had to grant making. And, I did earn my degree at UC Berkeley, a public institution. So a lot of our funding we had to pursue externally if you wanted to keep your teaching loads low. So it did come out of like a financial need, but I think applying to grants is such an important art and craft because it's formulaic in the sense that it's like there's a way to submit a powerful and competitive application where no one can steal your content. And I know, unfortunately, in grad school, there can be a culture where folks don't want to share previously awarded applications because people might steal their work, etc. The thing is, the pool is so small that people know that's their work. So if you try to steal it, people will call it out and they will not fund you. And I think in grad school, when I was awarded the Ford Foundation predoctoral grant, I really took it upon myself to meet with different grad students and share my application and sit down with folks to share like how did I ultimately construct this application and go through the process because that's how you learn. That's how I learned. So people were very gracious in sharing their applications with me, and I wanted to pay that work forward. And it's funny that work of like sitting down with graduate students and their grant making applications actually helped me in this position because most half of my job is reviewing grant proposals across our different major grant programs that fund minimally 500K, maximum 3.5 million. And I think what's unique about Spencer and the stratosphere of philanthropy is that all program staff have PhDs. And the reason why I think that's important to how we review the work and it's important is that we know what it means and what it takes to apply. We know the labor, we know the work that went into this. And so we respect that work. And so we try to give back to the scholarly community by having external reviewers review their proposals so folks can get feedback. I know folks historically have like received rejections and didn't know why they were rejected in the grant cycle at the foundation they submitted to. But at least at Spencer, whether you're awarded or declined, you at least get some sort of feedback. There have at least been two sets of eyes on your proposal as an investment in your work. So you can either resubmit to us again or you can take it somewhere else to get funded. But either way, your project will be strengthened and you have interlocutors at that stage, which is great. And then I just think with my job, it's really evolved in terms of like, it's just not about me. So in graduate student training and even in the professorate, you really dictate your own timelines, your own deliverables, your own outcomes, right? You don't necessarily have to work in a team in the same way as you do outside the academy. So I learned like, oh, my work streams and when I review, it's a hard deadline. Like I can't be like, oh, I need an extra week. No, because then you delay the payment and the post-award processes. So there's this kind of cognitive also process of shifting how you work. So now I can't really necessarily choose like a couple hours I work here and there in the university. I'm coming in every day, 9 to 5, or I work hybrid, which is I can work from home 3 days a week, come in 2 days a week, but still I'm working those hours. I can't really step out and do something else. And so I've learned like how to collaborate, how to be accountable, and how to ask for help. And one of the pinnacles of work at this foundation is we're a learning foundation. We are led by learning scientists in the School of Education. So I learned so much from them. And finally, I don't have a PhD in education. My PhD is in African American studies and African diaspora studies. So that also reinforces the idea that you don't have to have content knowledge always in these positions that you're looking to. They're looking at the skill sets you offer. And so I know later on we'll go through kind of like a job ad that we've sent out and like how to talk about your professional and career development in grad school. Because yes, you're students, but you're professionals, as you mentioned, Meredith, which I love. And so you shouldn't feel like, oh, I don't have the work experience these jobs need. It's like actually you do. And in ways, some places might think you're overqualified because you have a PhD, but there's a way in which you can articulate your work in a compelling way that folks are like, oh, actually, I can see how you being here would be a great opportunity for us because of the work you did and how you translated your work in the academy into a different professional industry.
Hmm. That's great. I mean, it feels like we're naturally flowing into that exact thing. Do you want to go ahead and talk us through that job posting?
Yes, of course. So let me link it in the chat. So this job posting is from the Spencer Foundation. We were looking for an associate program officer, I believe last spring.
Okay.
And so the post has passed, but I wanted to kind of show this as an example for some of the language you'll see in the job ad and how you can associate some experiences you've probably gleaned from your graduate training. So again, this is for an associate program officer position. This position requires you to review grants, requires you to attend different conferences on behalf of the foundation, and also project managing different events and convenings. So when you see the job ad, some of the requirements include research and analytical skills, communication, written and verbal, project and time management, handling multiple deadlines, planning, organizing events, communication with external stakeholders and field outreach, and then attention to detail and handling of confidential matters. So I'll go through each of those and say like, okay, in grad school, these are the skills you probably gleaned that'd be very useful for this position. So research and analytical skills, obviously, we have that training. We have designed an original research study as PhDs. We know how to project management, a complex project to deliver on a large deliverable. And you learn how to craft certain work streams of like, when do you need to be reading? When do you need to collect data? When do you need to do your writing? When do you need to go back to reading? When do you need to workshop? And then how do you draft out your ultimate chapters? So that's a useful skill set in this position. Communication, written and verbal. This is where highlighting your communication in teaching and like your pedagogy and your syllabus construction, your non-academic written pieces. More of us are writing outside of peer-reviewed journals and different outlets, podcasts. So it's showing how you can communicate complex ideas in digestible kind of mediums and formats. And then again, the project and time management, handling multiple deadlines. Yes, it's the dissertation, but also a lot of us have research assistantships, right? We have teaching assistantships, we have community work. So you're balancing multiple big projects, both as like the content creator and the one who's moving the work, which is really hard to do. I've learned folks do either one. And so be able to do both of those things is a particularly useful skill set in this world of philanthropy. And then planning and organizing events. Most of us have been on committees to organize lecture series like this, conferences and events. Communication with external stakeholders. There's something about how can you articulate the work and the vision of Spencer Foundation, and you have experience of doing that in terms of like the conferences that you've attended, to to your syllabi, articulating your work to undergraduates, and also community organizing and community involvement. Like, how do you translate the work that you've done in the academy and make it useful for local partnerships? And then attention to detail and organization. So, if you've peer reviewed certain research articles, managing anonymity of participants in your study or working your research assistantship speaks to that attention to detail and organization. And so I just tell folks, like you would do for an academic job advertisement, for these industry job ads, go through and look at like what's required. You don't have to have all the things. And most of these positions don't require a PhD in the foundation world. Most of them require BAs. So it's really leaning into the skills you're offering and translating it in a way that is compelling and that they can see like, oh yeah, they did have that skill set. And I learned from someone in the chief of staff industry. She was like, you actually don't need to know how to do the job before you're hired. You learn on the job. And they just want to know, do you have the skill sets to do that learning? And I would say in my career, I've had to learn new content pretty consistently. And that hasn't held me back. It's made me stronger because when you're on the edge of learning, you then lead with curiosity versus like, I already know. So you're more likely to ask questions. You're more likely to be collaboratively engaging because you're learning on the job while you're moving the work. And those are the folks that are great to work with, quite honestly. Those who feel like they already know it, they got it, they're just here, right? To like continue the work they have already done. They can be a little tougher to work with. So I would say don't be nervous if like you don't have the content exactly. It's okay. And you can be frank in the interview and just say how you are an avid learner. As PhDs, we literally sign up to learn for an elongated time period as we produce original thought.
Yeah, that's such an exciting reframing of because sometimes when we talk about like non-professoriate jobs, people I feel like I can see the light dying in their eyes because they're like, oh, now I have to do public writing and I have to have a community engaged project and I have to do interdisciplinary work and it's like not to be like, someone's like smarmy mom, but like those are the practice rounds for like anything that you would inevitably do, not just in foundation work, but in lots of jobs that require both deep thinking and communicative skills, right? That like it's an opportunity to start to get your feet wet on this sense of like, I can engage in a project where I don't know everything. I'm not the expert, and yet I will still have a lot to contribute because of the ways that I have been working already in the academy. So like I love how you kind of seamlessly aligned those things in a way that unfolds opportunities rather than just piles obligations onto students, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. I did want to share an opportunity I just found this morning
Oh,
that
cool. Yeah.
a live job ad. So the Spencer one already passed, but this is from the Skillman Foundation. They're based in Detroit and they do phenomenal work with young people and grant making. They even have a council of young people who are making decisions and
Wow.
or community efforts. So they do beautiful work and they're looking for a director of ground building. And I just figured someone in this space will probably be an amazing candidate. The application is due October 31st. And that's the thing I want to highlight too, using LinkedIn. I know when I was in grad school, they were pushing like, make your own website, da, 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 da. The problem is your website's not necessarily in conversation with people versus your LinkedIn is. And both academics and different industries are on there. And what's nice about LinkedIn is they also recommend you to certain jobs. So like, oh, this job might fit some of your skill set. So really beefing up your LinkedIn, using your free account. I don't have the premium, I don't even pay, but like really leaning into that conversationally. Yes, and that salary too. That's the other thing. You also get paid more. I find outside of the academy, I found out my current job, I'm like, I was doing seven of these positions in my one role. And now I have a clear lane. And it's nice to have a lane of work and a cachet of what it can look like. So it's opening our minds and expanding it and also our livelihoods. I think now we're pushing, like we're just not doing this for free. And when I did internships in grad school and write-ups, I would be shocked when people are like, okay, well, we'll compensate you. I'm like, wait, you'll compensate me? I thought I wrote it because this is the internship. They're like, no, 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 this is really good work and you're gonna help us get funding with it. So here's your like, honorarium. Like, oh, I have to learn how to also be compensated. And as you're about to finish your degree, you'll be invited to speak about your work in different places. And that's actually okay to talk about of just how are you going to compensate this expertise because you've dedicated time and people are paying for your time. That's really what it is. And so I've learned how to be more empowered in that than I have been in the past. And I just ask because a lot of folks have funding as part of it to provide compensation like this. And so I did want to add that as well before I forgot.
No, that's great. Yeah, let them tell you no. It's like a post-it note on my screen. That's great. These are such great postings, and I love that you've offered them to us. Just as these are job posting, job ads. Like it's a thing to close read. It's a genre, like all of the genres that we study of writing in the academy. Um, and I'm wondering, I think we should take a little bit of time because I think a lot of people they really don't understand what program officers do, like on a day to day. And I know you talked about like a significant part of your job is reviewing grants and reviewing grant proposals, but there must be a certain aspect of like relationship building and other kinds of strategic thinking. So I was just wondering if you could talk through some of those other aspects of your job that people might not know about or might want to, just hear a little bit more about.
Yes, thank you for that question. I was thinking back to my first day, and so I come in, I'm like, okay, I'll be doing like grant review at the hundreds, and they're like, actually, you have a half stack because we need you to project manage. I was like, okay. And I wasn't thinking about that work I had done in the past. And I was like, oh, I've never done this officially outside the academy, so let me go for it. And I realized I learned I had to a golden skill set in project management. So part of my job is not only reading, but I also project manage several projects now at Spencer where I move deliverables around like a certain outcome. So for instance, we have what's called convenings around high leverage topics and gathering together policymakers, practitioners, and scholars because it's rare that we're all in the same room. And it's to really push the field to think in creative ways that align with the missions and policy and practice and to push that work forward. And so that work was really a good experience because I had to learn how to talk to external partners, articulate the needs, ensure we have accurate staffing, that documentation is clear. And so building that and galvanizing that, I saw that, oh, projects can't really move without that person. And so I really leaned into that expertise, so much so that then I was promoted a couple of years later to a program officer position for strategic initiatives. So now I'm leading cross-organizational program management, where I'm ensuring that as we move on different deliverables for our strategic work, we are doing it in equity and we're doing it in conscientious kind of efforts of like not bottlenecking projects and workloads. And so my job is to essentially be like, okay, what's your timeline? Okay, great. We're doing this as well. So you need to move this product here, put this person there. And so I found like there is cool work in that aspect. And also at Spencer, we have a unique opportunity to continue our research. 20% of my time is technically allocated to my research, meaning I get funding to attend 2 conferences a year, fully funded. I mean, my grad student heart was just singing when I was like, I don't have to share a hotel with 5 people. So I share it now with 3 of my friends who are at the conferences I go to. In addition, we have money for like writing retreats and like professional development. And so that's when I kind of like set aside time, like, okay, I want to travel to like San Diego, for instance, and go for a weekend and write my book prospectus. And so to have support like that's amazing. And finally, we also have academic mentors we can work with from the field. You can choose. Spencer invites them in to say, hey, would you love to mentor this program officer at Spencer on their work? And most folks say yes. So I was able to also build networks and connections with other academics while I'm sitting in the philanthropy world. So I love that Spencer is still invested in my scholarship and my research, which that's not the case for all foundations per se. But in my job, it is. And so I would say I do a lot of things, but they all serve the mission of, transforming kind of equitable conditions in the world at the helm of education research and supporting that amazing work that faculty are pushing forward. So it's a dynamic job, but I love it and I learn so much every day.
That's so cool. And it's nice that, yeah, there's such an alignment here between like the values and that they're enacting at your, that your employer is enacting that it's more than just saying, we support you in your research. They like literally, writing the checks to support these initiatives. Um, and I love too this, like that you have this role focusing on equity-based sort of strategic initiatives. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about how your scholarly like intellectual content level expertise is showing up in your in your decision making in your role.
I really love that question. So part of the work is we come together as program staff monthly to
Mhm.
share some of our research. Either it's for a conference presentation, article, some folks also for the job market, because we are on contract. I didn't mention that. So we're set for like 4 years
Okay.
contract. So it's normal to look for something outside of your position. And so we normalize that, which is great. But in this setting, I found that I found my academic voice differently because I wasn't so consumed by my own kind of inner circle and the critiques. I cared less basically on like, is this method, is this type of writing okay to everyone else? What are the holes? How can I appease the field, the questions? And instead, I was actually able to take a step back right within my own self and talk to folks who are outside my field to see, is this work legible? And so initially I struggled a lot with the dissertation I produced. I would say most people hate their dissertations. I mean, it's a labor of love, it's hard, and it's like for 4 people. Okay. So I learned my voice of like, you know what? I want to write in a way that my ethnographic data isn't just about these bite-sized stories or case studies of the young girls I worked with at a continuation school in California, but I want to write it in a creative way because they loved writing. And I don't want to do that translation work of like, this is for academia, this is for the community. And instead, it's like I write in community with kind of creative stories and language so it can be enjoyed and engaging and also hold anonymity. At this point it's hard to hold anonymity in our qualitative research because of the internet and how everything's available online. And so I think part of doing the creative work also honors some of those like safety measures to ensure folks could not be found in their stories or outside of them really. And so I feel like since I took time away from the academy and I was attending conferences because I wanted to and I wanted to learn, and I didn't feel pressure of like, okay, I have to get tenure and I have to write this book. Instead, I'm like, no, I'm sharing out this like Black feminist creative work because I want to do it and it's part of my values and my passion as a writer. And so I feel like it just reinvigorated me to actually produce great work. And my colleagues were phenomenal in the room. Like I shared some excerpts, we all cried together because again, it centered the vulnerability in a way that I couldn't necessarily lean into in the dissertation just because of the season of writing I was in. So it's such a reminder of like you can be a researcher, a writer anywhere. And it's not only for the academy. And a lot of orgs look and philanthropy, nonprofits, they're looking for researchers because we just have a way to that we can digest complex ideas and share it out to a general audience when we find and tap into our voice. So I feel like my foot in, foot out really was an advantage for the work I wanted to produce and how I wanted to produce it in a values aligned way.
Sorry, I'm muted. I mute myself because I'm constantly like, yes, Kenley, and but Zoom makes that really hard. So um yes, that's really great to hear. And I love this like, navigating sort of a border territory between like being a researcher and not thinking of that as a strictly academic like oriented thing to do. It seems so capacious, both just for your own scholarship and just for like rooting yourself in a broader environment where you can find people that share your values, both just about being a certain kind of qualitative researcher or a humanist, and also like your values of just being in the world. And so I guess my last question, and then I can also cede the floor to Laura, might have some other questions as well. And I know that we have some time, of course, for people in the room to ask their own questions. Is maybe what has this opportunity given you in terms of like um, a sense of where the humanities live in the world that isn't just higher education? Like how has that sense of, where these activities are happening evolved for you over time?
I love that question. And I will say, I don't think I shared it here. I started my PhD journey in a sociology department, very empirically based, qualitative or quantitative, not much theorizing, not many questions of how do we become who we are in this world,
Mm.
and the significance of that. And when I transferred to UC Berkeley with my advisor in Black Studies, at first it's very intimidating. So I'm like, I don't know this literature. I don't know these methodologies. I don't really like you really have to get a handle of theory in a way that like I just wasn't trained prior. And so my advisor's like, it's okay. You learn content and you have the skill sets to do grad school because you've already done part of it. And so in that way, I fell in love with humanities because I think it gives the breadth of humane study. And I love that there's a resurgence of like humanist social scientists. So it's like, how do you incorporate the theorizations that are informed by everyday life, right? And that people would take up and just think with and sit with in beautiful ways. And then how do we bring that back into the empirical study we have? So a lot of my work around Black girlhood studies is truly an infusion of that. And I published a piece in the Black Feminist Sociology anthology, and one of the introductions they gave me was like, this methodological inquiry and piece centers love. Love is the vocabulary of the methods under which I engaged to not only learn the stories of young people, but to share space and the emotive exchange that you actually experience that's beyond the participant observations or the semi-structured interviews. It's the in-between times. And it's those connections that ethnography couldn't necessarily document, but that humanities could embrace. And so I would say, in translation to this world, I feel like, especially for philanthropy, they're trying to get the humanity back into the funding streams. So historically, funding is really at the discernment of leadership of that foundation or that family, right? And so that can be really problematic because they're like, oh, I think this is important, but it might not be important to the community you're trying to impact. Like, what do they actually want? What do they envision? What do they dream, right, about? And so I think now there's a turn. So there's been like a $500 million investment across several foundations to initiate what's called Humanity AI. So it's like we're on this arms race of just like funding AI in a way that's just saturating the field, but not necessarily engaging the people, the communities, the families who are going to be impacted by this work. So they're interested in those who are invested in that type of work as we move through this AI revolution, but making it ensuring it's humane forward. And folks in the humanities are great people to be involved in that because you know the historicity as part of your research. You had to dig into the relevant literature, you had to do the close readings, and they want that as part of the conversation. And I think a foundation that does a beautiful job of merging the arts is the Mellon Foundation. They also hire creatives, artists, researchers to both review, right, their grant making, but also curate beautiful opportunities in museums and in community space. Also another example, it's called A Long Way Home in Chicago. So it centers the lives of Black girls and women in Southside Chicago. And they did a beautiful exhibit at a downtown cultural exhibition on like the sanctuary of Black girlhood. And so these were two professors who moved the work into real life and worked in community to really kind of support and create something beautiful with young girls that showcases their everyday lives and their theorizations. And so I feel like research, it's a craft and it's an art at the end of the day that I realize other industries don't have time to do. And so to have someone on your team who already has the skill sets to build something of that kind of work is essential. And so I always say, like, again, research lives outside the academy. You think about our own communities, like you have like your aunties who do genealogy. I'm like, they're historians, like they're doing archival work. So again, we can honor the ways in which we do research in everyday life in our professional lives. And I just think sometimes in grad school, you're so focused on like what everyone else is doing and against this line of like, okay, tenure track R1, and we all track in one direction. When other professional degrees, they don't have one track. There's multiple modes of work and options. And I just hope that as this conversation, folks lean into like, how do I want to work? What are my values? What do I want my everyday to be like? How can my work be expansive in other industries outside of solely the professorate? And also, what can I do even in the academy? There's so many different jobs you can take in the academy that aren't tenure track and that are just as rich and viable and honors all the hard work and dedication and sacrifice we put into achieving this degree. And so I just hope it's like, just put respect on your name and like know that your work is relevant and important. And it's just as much as you knowing your journey as it is learning the formal training in grad school. I hope
Very
that made sense. I
good.
went off a little tangent.
That's great. Yeah. No, thank you so much. That's well put. Laura, did you have anything you wanted to also follow up with?
Yeah, well, I had just one. I want to say that this sounds like a dream job,
Yeah.
and that I just love hearing about all the ways that you are able to live out your values and continue doing research and also really get into these puzzles of project management and supporting different projects. And it just it sounds so amazing. So I'm so glad to learn more about it. And I did have one kind of practical question to end on, which is um, it can feel kind of scary to cold email someone or to reach out to someone for informational interviews. But as we know just from listening to you, like hearing someone talk about their work is not only a chance for you to get to know about them, but also for them to kind of feel feel appreciated as someone who has some knowledge to offer back to grad students. So could you just talk a little bit about kind of, I don't know, the kind of email that you sent to people when you're looking to reach out to them, kind of what you hope someone who wants to informationally interview you will do for you, and just kind of a little bit behind the scenes of that process.
No, I really love that question because, like you said, it's kind of terrifying to cold call someone you don't necessarily know well. And so, what I did was I was very honest. I was like, I think I'd already earned my PhD at that point. So I was like, I recently earned a PhD, but I'm looking at pursuing different career options outside the academy. I read your profile and I saw you do X, Y, Z. That sounds like phenomenal work. Would you mind scheduling a brief 30-minute Zoom call or a phone call with me if you're available in the next coming weeks? I look forward to hearing from you. I kept it very simple. And also, you need to name what people do so they know that you read their bio and information. Because at the end of the day, folks don't have a lot of time to read like a paragraph. You don't need to, include your dissertation abstract, title, none of that. Just really, it's about learning first about just different opportunities and learning their journey. And folks love to talk about themselves and love to share what they learned. And I think it's also good to know because you can see if you're similar. So a lot of these informational interviews I did, I was like, oh, I feel the same way about my research. Okay, I have the same questions about how I can move the work in different industries and spaces. And so at the end of the day, it's just good for you as a touchstone to know you're on the right path. And what I learned now that I wish I knew later was like, I could have done it sooner. I was scared to do it in grad school because they're like apply to like a billion things, especially in humanities. We're interdisciplinary. So there's so many departments you can apply to, right, to make your work legible. But I wish I had been a little more thoughtful because some of the places, it's not about living in the place. I looked at the department, I'm like, would I work in this department? I don't know. Just seeing like off top of like who's there and the vision they have, but also allowing some time to apply to just the general job advertisements outside the academy. I wish I had taken a chance on some of those as well because they have a different time horizon. Academic jobs, like, you wait 9 months after, the interview. So it's a long haul. But other jobs, I mean, you'll find out 3 months later if you have it or not, if not sooner. So I would say thank you for that question because it's the pragmatism of the reach out that I think is really important to highlight and talk about.
Yeah, for sure. I would second that. I feel like that, if you delay with the informational interview, then it becomes like this fraught secret hope that it will translate into actual job offer, which is like way too much pressure to put on something that should really be a free flowing conversation where you're just, you're learning, right? So,
Well, I
yeah.
did want to add with that statement, you also don't know what opportunities are on the horizon there. So not all
Yeah, exactly.
opportunities. So if you're saying I'm interested, they might actually call you back and be like, "Oh, we have a post." And after I talk with you, I think you should apply. So you just never know actually what can come out of these conversations.
You never know. And like LinkedIn has its value for sure, but like, like you just can't emphasize the human connection enough when you're thinking about jobs and networking. Like being on the internet will scare you into thinking that you're one of billions. And like you're not. The world is kind of small with this industry, right? So yeah, that's great. Great. There are a couple people in the room. If either of them have any questions, you're welcome to put them forward in the chat or turn off your mic and ask. Um, yeah, this has been such a great conversation. I'm so glad that we're recording it for people who couldn't make it today.
Wonderful. I also posted my email too, so if you want to reach out as well, and have
Oh,
further
wow.
conversation,
That's
I'm
really kind of
happy.
you. That's great. Timmy turned his video on. I don't know if that means he has a question though. No.
No. Yeah, I've heard this talk a few times so far. I thought the questions that
That's great. That's great.
Yes, yes. I did want to say too, like the different periods and when you're in grad school, also when
Yeah.
you can have some of this outreach. So I would say like if you're in your first through third year, what I did was I applied to internships.
Mhm.
So even if you have funding, I think the summertime can be very rich on
Yeah.
kind of doing your work in a more experiential way.
Mhm.
Like you get kind of stuck over the summer. Faculty aren't really responding. You're kind of tired after a crazy semester. So it's like applying, and folks are looking for researchers and
Yes.
students to do critical work. So I would say like look into different orgs and communities that you already have an interest in and passion about, and let that steer kind of who you connect with. Like if you do museum work, definitely like supporting museums and curation, like writing the descriptions of the work, like they need more writers for that. And so I'd look into that. And also, I was going to say for that first few years, also do RA-ships, research assistantships, do a teaching assistantship if you can, because it's just good practice in terms of communication and getting your head out of like your own work that can be intimidating, and just the draw of just doing coursework. It adds a level of just kind of thinking outside of what you're concerned about, and you can see the other side of it and how you can produce alongside another faculty member, another research team, things like that. And then I would say my latter years, 4 through 6, I think it's important to mentor. I think mentorship provides, it's just not giving to someone else. It is a way of practicing direct supervision, because you have to learn how to teach someone else what you know within the field of interest they're interested in. So I would say a strength of mine as a mentor was I didn't necessarily have to know the content of your work, but I know how to move your work to result in a thesis. I would also mentor grad students after I went through my qual exams, after I was awarded my grant making. I then started mentoring folks to do the same. So I started helping product manage their qualifying exam schedule. I also supporting the grant writing. So I think there's utility in that. It's just not about like doing a good-hearted thing. It's actually a professional development opportunity when you are able, right, to not only communicate your work, but mentor someone else. And then you can use those opportunities in your job interests and career opportunities that you see on the horizon, because you can't predict what's going to be out there. I know I saw jobs early on, like my second year. I'm like, oh, this is the perfect job for me, but I'm in year two. This is never going to happen again. And then my mind's like, it will. It's okay. There's rhythms. And it's just like, I remember being a time in COVID where, folks they were rescinding job offers, right? They were enacting hiring freezes, enrollment freezes. And it was a scary time, similar and different to this time. And I realize it's just like sometimes the conditions can be the focal point. You have to think about, okay, what can I do and
Yeah.
prepare the best I can with what I have? Because then you feel a little less overwhelmed by it all. And then you're just focusing on what you can do in the meantime and continue just to connect. And like people, that's how people get jobs, is through their networks. Themselves. I know sometimes people are like, oh, my faculty member is going to introduce him. Like, yes, that's a piece of it, but there's something about you reaching out personally and you having conversations and connections.
Yeah.
Um, it can be also empowering for your work too, because you're critiqued in grad school. Like you're an apprentice, you're learning what's not going great. And then you, on the flip side of the job market, people are like, oh, I love this. This is exciting. So you also have to prepare for like, oh, I'm an expert in my own right. I'm ready. Like, let's go, the next step. So
Yeah, that's great. And it is such a good reminder. Yeah, like, well, I should say, I'll plug our own internship program. We run a humanities internship program in the summer that plugs doctoral students into local orgs to collaborate with those teams. Great skill building. And like, one of the things I hate to hear, I don't hear it terribly often, but it's out there, is like, I need it to line up directly with my content expertise that I'm trying to develop, or else it's not a good use of my time. And like, I love how eloquently you described that the opposite is in fact true. Like if you are getting any, including a professor job, like you need to be able to talk outside of your own project, and you need to be able to demonstrate how what you've learned, contributes to other projects, other goals, right? Beyond your own research goals. So great reminder that like it's never too early to start thinking in that way when you're in graduate school, and that there's just so many things that you really can do. Even when, the outlooks are really scary. There's just, that means, right? They need more volunteers. They need more of those initial, like low paid, unpaid opportunities that'll help you develop in those ways. Yeah, that's
I
great.
love that opportunity that you all have for the internships and those connections. And I just want to plus one that again with at UC Santa Barbara, when I was working with my advisor, I was part of a lab on a project that had nothing to do with my work. It was like on, policing and just like micro strategies. And I was like, okay, I'll just try it out. And then because of that, that's part of the reason why I transferred to Berkeley with my advisor. Because she was like, I need someone to open my lab and to run it. So you never know what happens when you step outside of
Yeah.
your work opportunities on the other side. And you don't have to know exactly the next step. I've learned lean in curiosity, lean into learning, and lean into knowing yourself the best, because then you'll be ready for the
Oh,
opportunity.
there can't be better words to end on than those. Thanks so much, Kenley.
It's wonderful to spend time with you all.
Yeah, you too. This has been great. Thank you for sharing your contact.
Yeah.
And this is recorded, so I'll share it out to graduate students. And I'm so glad that we have as a resource. What a great way to kick off our Humanities Career Spotlight series. And thanks again. Best of luck to you in Chicago, and looking forward to staying in connection with you.
Thank